I live in a small cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. The next nearest neighborhood is over 4 miles away. One night a few years ago, we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. So far from main roads and on the weekend, I knew our roads will remain unplowed for quite some time. I went to my out back deck door to look at the snow-draped trees and the still heavily falling flurries and take some pictures when I noticed footprints leading to my door, then turning around and leaving. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbor's side and thought that one of their more delinquent kids played a joke as my sledding tube on the railing was popped. I decided I'd wait till later as it was early to call their parents. I went on Facebook, and after scrolling for a bit, I noticed one of my neighbors closer to the entrance posted, "Did someone knock for me or something at my back door?" I immediately called her, talked, and told her I have an idea. I called the first house on the entrance and told him what was going on. He went and checked, and sure enough, they were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end, and they told me there was none there. Then I got a call from my next-door neighbor. She called the woman that lives next to the end house. She said that there were footprints that led to her door, but none led away. We already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said that it's an emergency now. They told us the roads are still all unplowed and they can't send a plow truck to clear the way as they're a privately owned company. The woman was losing it, so one of the husbands, huge bear of a man, across the road from her texted her to say he was coming over to invite her over. He came and she left. We put up one guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 p.m., a plow truck came as well as 3 cop cars. The couple she was staying with and her went to her house and stood in the doorway as the police searched. They found nothing. She begged them to keep looking, so they did. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time only one came up. He took her to the side room, and we could hear hysterical crying. By now we are all out there. Me and a few of the other guys started towards the door when several police confronted us. They told us they found someone hiding under a cover opening in the stairwell that she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later, a scruffy man screaming and kicking came out in cuffs and was led away. In his little campout, they found blankets she just cleaned and put away in the room next to hers. She stayed in other people's houses for a long time before going back. Even then, she wouldn't stay alone. She sold the house the next summer. He turned out to be a thrill-seeking junkie who was on probation for assault against a family member. The cops told us that they feel like he didn't want to stay at his apartment after a fight with his roommate and drove off in his roommate's car from the county over and got stuck in our unplowed roads. And that is why you always make sure you lock your doors. I've been flying for almost 30 hours and the flight attendants won't stop crying. 30 hours ago, I hopped on a late-night flight from New York heading to Los Angeles. After boarding, I saw that I had an entire row to myself. Takeoff passed without incident, and soon I was stretched out for a nap across the row. I slept for a few hours. I don't know how long, but I woke up to some severe turbulence. It's possible that the lights in the cabin went out for a moment, but I was so disoriented that it's hard to say. I checked my phone to see that it was 4:03 a.m., which I figured gave me about an hour until we landed. When I looked out my window, I was shocked to see nothing but wide open ocean. My jaw dropped. There's obviously no ocean between New York and Los Angeles. I hit the button to call the flight attendant and spent the next few minutes racking my brain for a lake that could have possibly been big enough to explain what I was seeing. I jumped when the attendant flipped off the light. She was grinning from ear to ear, and tears were pouring down her cheeks. "How can I help you, sir?" she asked. I froze for a moment at her reaction before deciding to just ask my question. "Where are we? Why does it look like we're flying over an ocean?" She wiped her cheeks to clear the tears, still grinning wildly. "Sir, we'll be landing in about an hour." Okay. Thank you," I said. After she left, I checked the clock on my phone again. 4:03 a.m. blinked back at me. It hadn't changed. I had to have been waiting with my call light on for at least 5 minutes. How was it possible that it hadn't changed at all? I opened up my laptop and saw it too displayed 4:03 a.m. I pulled out my phone, started a stopwatch in the app, and spent the next 2 hours looking back and forth between the clocks, waiting for them to change. They never did. I tapped the shoulder of an older woman sitting in the row ahead of me. She looked back, an annoyed expression across her face. "Yes," she asked. "Do you know how long until we land?" I asked. She narrowed her eyes. "That flight attendant said it would be about another hour." I shook my head in confusion. "That flight attendant? We talked almost 2 hours ago. We should have landed already." She stared at me as if I was crazy. I was going to continue trying to convince her, but I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun to see a male flight attendant grinning down at me, tears pinging off his cheeks onto my shoulder. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to calm down, or I'll be calling the captain." I told him that wouldn't be necessary and sat back. He removed his hand and stepped away. The flight attendants continued to stop by every few hours offering meals. My stopwatch continued to tick up and is now telling me that I've been on this plane for more than 30 hours. I've explored all of coach and tried talking to some of the other passengers, but they've all told me that they're expecting to land in an hour or so. Around 3 hours ago, I tried getting into first class. I made it past the curtain but was escorted back by 2 grinning flight attendants. Their grip on my arms were like iron. "Sir, the seatbelt sign is on," one said. "Please remain in your seat with your buckle fastened. We'll be landing in about an hour." I'd just about given up hope when a woman came down the aisle dressed in a business suit. She didn't look at me or slow down, but she dropped a piece of paper onto my tray as she made her way to the bathrooms at the back of the plane. I shot a look around before unrolling it. It said, "Are you stuck too?" I pulled out a pen and wrote, "Yes. It's been 30 hours." I folded the scrap of paper up and set it on the tray closest to the aisle. She left the bathroom and picked it up as she passed. It's been 20 minutes since then. I don't know why, but I don't think the flight attendants would like it if they knew we were talking. When I was too afraid to fall asleep one night, my dad, in his matter-of-fact way, told me to just wait it out and see who they really were. When I had the dream a couple days later, I didn't try to wake myself up like usual. I just waited to see who they were. I didn't resist, just let them reach towards me. I don't remember this next part, but both of my parents told me the story later when I was older. They both woke up at the same time around 1 in the morning, with the urgent feeling they needed to check on me. When they went into my room, I was lying in the middle of the floor, dead asleep, with my mouth open like I was trying to scream. I felt hot when they picked me up, and when they took my temperature, I had a ridiculously high fever. They took me to the ER, and the nurse said if they hadn't brought me in, I might have had lasting damage or even died. They said my fever was so high, if I hadn't gotten the medical treatment when I did, the heat might have begun to kill my cells. Who knows what state I would have been in by morning. They never figured out what caused it, and they wrote it off as some medical anomaly, sending me on my way. I haven't had the dream again since. I wish that was the scariest part of the story, but it's not. I strangely managed to forget all about it until very recently. My great-aunt has dementia, and so my whole family has been helping her clean out her house before she moves in with my aunt and uncle. I was talking to her one day, and she kept repeatedly asking me to grab the photo albums in the hole in the wall behind the horses. I wasn't sure what she was talking about, but she seemed so distressed that I decided to follow her instructions. I went to her bedroom, where there was a big painting of horses hanging on the wall. I checked behind it, and lo and behold, there were a couple photo albums. I brought them to her, and we started to look through them together. She started pointing at a picture of a teenage girl, calling her Catherine, and then pointing at me. My grandmother is long dead. She died during childbirth. As far as I can tell, she had no connection to any of this. And as far as I knew at the time, my great-aunt had no other siblings. But there they were, posing for a family picture with my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. My name is not Catherine, so I had to remind her who I was. I didn't think much of it, because she often calls people by the wrong name. But then I looked at the picture. This girl looked exactly like how I did at her age. I imagined she would have looked just like me at any age. I asked what happened to her, and for a minute it was like my great-aunt was fully back with me. She said she died of a fever given to her by the smiling, shape-shifting devil who haunted her dreams. I tried to ask more questions, but all she said was that the devil got her. He likes the blonde ones. The girl in the picture, Catherine, and I are the only natural blondes in my whole family. Unfortunately, my aunt had a stroke a couple of days later which left her unable to speak, so I never got to ask her any more questions. But I still wonder about Catherine sometimes, and what could have happened to me if my parents hadn't woken up that night. I like to think that it was the ghost of Catherine, making sure no one else died from the dreams. But I'll never really know anything more about the dreams or Catherine, and I guess I'll have to live with that. I've always felt that something has followed me from each place I've lived. Just weird little experiences. One night I was home alone in middle school, upstairs in my room when the power went out. In short, the power went out and I decided to sit on my bed and wait it out. When a couple minutes passed and nothing happened, I got up to go downstairs, and when I got to my doorway, I heard a loud scratching, like claws, going across the wall of the small office that was right across from my bedroom. We didn't have trees around the house, so nothing could have made noises by brushing up against the house, and never an issue with rodents. Before that, when I would have friends stay over, we would sleep downstairs so we could watch cable on the TV, and I remember one time where we just sat and listened to footsteps walking around upstairs. Everyone else's room was downstairs, and the stairs were right next to the living room, so it would have been obvious if someone went up there. In my first college apartment, I would always hear this clicking noise coming from the corner of the room when I was trying to fall asleep. It happened all of the time. It almost sounded like a hair straightener just being opened and closed. It would only stop if I sat up in bed suddenly. I've never felt super uncomfortable or uneasy anywhere, and I know noises can come from a lot of different things, but all of the weird things I've experienced have been, in my mind, unexplainable. But I've also had good experiences that I believe were signs from loved ones. When my beloved grandma passed, we had a rosary ceremony at our church. She was a devout Catholic. She had gifted me one blessed by Pope John Paul II. I was determined to find it when I got home so I could use it. I had boxes everywhere at home still, yet when I went to look for it, I picked a specific box and found it immediately. It could have been luck, but I'd like to think she guided me to the exact right spot. So this was around 2010. The internet was new to me, and video calls were the shit among my friends during those days. One day, one of my friends called me on Skype, and we spoke about stupid things that I can't even remember. Suddenly, my friend froze for a second, but the video wasn't interrupted. After some seconds, he asked, "Who's the person behind you?" I didn't turn to look because I thought that he was playing a lame-ass prank on me. But I asked him to describe the person, and he said that it was a boy of around 10 to 12 years, wearing a red t-shirt. He kept on asking me to look behind me, and I finally did. However, as expected, there was no one there. It has been almost 10 years, and he still maintains that there was someone behind me. After a few days, I started feeling uneasy around the table that my computer was on. I would feel something rubbing my foot from beneath the table, but I thought of rats and tangled wires as the explanation for it. After a few weeks, my mother said that she had been noticing stuff move in the kitchen by themselves. I didn't believe her until, one day, I saw a glass move by itself. It was clinking like something was stuck inside it while it was upside down. However, I didn't think of it much. After some days, I started to see some women in white around my bed at around 2 a.m. It could have been sleep paralysis. Once, my bua, Aunt, told me that something had also touched her feet beneath the computer table. Finally, my grandmother decided to cleanse the house, and I haven't noticed anything suspicious since then. I am not superstitious, but I saw what I saw. Years ago, my now husband worked for an industrial laundry company in their head office when a PR disaster happened that also mentally screwed up a number of people. Their company collected laundry from large hospitals and medical-type businesses, e.g. care homes, etc., and cleaned them. You can imagine the sort of heavy-duty cleaning, bleaching, boiling, etc. needed to remove those sort of biological contaminants. One day, a laundry cart went through the usual bleaching, boiling cycle before it dropped out into a conveyor belt to be sorted for drying/pressing when there was a horrid scream. A small newborn baby's body had been discovered tangled up amongst the sheets. It had been cooked. The laundry workers were distraught. The whole place had to be shut down. Police called, and the laundry tracked back to the hospital to discover what happened. It turns out, thankfully in some ways, stillborn baby had been left in the cot waiting to be taken down to the hospital mortuary after the parents had said their goodbyes and covered it with a blanket, but somehow one of the nurses hadn't realized. Just on shift was the best guess. So just grabbed up all the linen out the cot and off the bed in the delivery room with the body bundled inside and emptied it into the laundry hamper/trolley thing. The other nurses/parents assumed the baby had been collected by the mortuary to be stored awaiting their funeral decisions. The laundry was found not to be to blame, but the parents were devastated and the hospital took a lot of flack. The poor laundry workers who discovered the body ended up being given counseling before eventually quitting. The laundry did amend its practice to individually emptying each laundry hamper into the industrial machines instead of just tipping them in to stop anything like that happening again. My family has a similar story, and I'm pretty sure some of you serial killer buffs out there might figure out who it is before the reveal because their story is pretty unique. When my parents were in college, they went on a trip down to Florida. They had met through mutual friends and were down there together but hadn't gone on a date yet. My dad and one of his friends were planning to meet my mom and some of her friends at a hotel, but being the carefree college guys they lost track of time and realized it was impossible to get to the hotel on time by walking. They decided the best solution to their problem was to hitchhike, and a car with 2 women picked him up. Everything seemed fine until the driver asked them if it was okay to stop for gas. My dad and his friend agreed it was no problem since they were making good time, and she drove into a gas station. She then pumped her car full of gas before hopping back in and flooring it, basically stealing the gas with 2 hitchhikers in the back. My dad and his friend were beginning to freak out when she pulled a gun from under her seat and asked, "Are we gonna have a problem?" or something like that. My dad and his friend shook their heads vehemently because what else do you do in that situation? She then drove them to the hotel and dropped them off without so much as a scratch, and they kinda thought nothing of it until the news started reporting on a serial killer in Florida known as Aileen Wuornos. He took one look at her picture and instantly recognized her as the driver. The only reason my dad thinks she didn't straight up kill them was because they were super polite and respectful to her, and her victims were usually scumbag guys trying to take advantage of her.